James, one of the things that's been pressing on my mind and my heart is the conversation that we're having and the debate that people are having over the internet and stuff about the impact of the COVID virus on our community. And the question that they've asked is, was this be the finally be the wake-up call that this community needs to turn inward into themselves, to heal themselves, and to move forward as a people? I mean, what do you think about that?
I think the inward turn is probably already in place before Corona because of the backlash evident amongst white voters in the Trump administration. We're in a backlash era, in the same way we were after the Civil War, and you had the Reconstruction period, in the same way you had the period after what scholarship calls the Second Reconstruction in the civil rights movement, the modern civil rights movement. We are in, I think, a third civil rights cycle, and so it's already in place. Black people already mobilized in the electorate because they understood the urgency of now. And so what I think is really sort of affecting them more is that the coronavirus has exposed the already existing realities of poverty, of health disparity, of the issues of policies related to Medicare, the different parts of it, attitudes from government toward the public as opposed to the market. The government in 2008, 2007 with Obama was quick to save the auto industry, and the capitalists want to save the airline industry and not focus on everyday people. I think Corona has been a kind of cleansing, a kind of purging, and a kind of expose on who America really is. And it's just basically taking the veil and pulled away the veil to expose that all these already existing realities of everyday people, whatever they were before Corona hit here, have hit disproportionately in those communities that were already disproportionately affected by everything else negatively. So if it was HIV/AIDS contagions, if it was cancer, if it was high blood, hypertension, cholesterol, and
diabetes,
pre-diabetes, black folk, brown folk, poor people of every group were already predisposed. So Katrina is simply exposing it. And like a demon or the Passover death angel, it's like going through, smelling for weakness and killing where it can, and then passing over. You can't think of Corona not spiritually. If you're only thinking of Corona in terms of the medical and the scientific and not the spiritual implications of now, then you are really ignoring one of the greatest catastrophic Armageddon type things you're ever going to experience. Armageddon can't be much worse than this outside of blood, guns and people bleeding in the streets. But otherwise, walk outside and see the absence. I mean, the most popular Christian books are called The Absence and taken away, and stuff like this. So I think we're in a situation where Corona is exposing the Black predicament. Corona is exposing the poor predicament. Corona is exposing the greed of capital and the greed of Wall Street. The idea that you have market solutions rather than people solutions, where you actually need people to stimulate the economy. Obama and Bush did this. Bush gave checks to people and deposited them directly in their accounts. Remember, he said after 9/11, go out and shop, go buy, please go spend, save capitalism. Well, now they're asking the people to save capitalism again, but this is not a capitalist saving moment. This is a moment where socialist programs are probably more suited to now in terms of the widespread crisis effect of Corona, in terms of exposing that a lot of millions of people are vulnerable without some kind of healthcare protection in the face of a pandemic. And if you don't have a job like me at a university where I don't have to worry about my healthcare as long as I keep that job, but if I lose my job tomorrow, I'm in trouble. And that's the reality of most insured Americans, is they're job-based. And so, this is where Bernie's arguments, and that's what I'm saying, the socialist solutions are what are trying for now. You need of FDR right now, not Ronald Reagan. You need somebody who wants more government investment in people as the employer of the people. You don't need Ronald Reagan talking about government isn't the solution, government is the problem. You need exactly the opposite of Ronald Reagan now. This is a time for FDR. And Joe Biden is sounding more like Ronald Reagan, for example, as the issue of the health effects of corona has been exposed. Joe Biden is just holding ignorantly and stubbornly to his centrist position of not moving to a progressive position of Medicare for all. Even Donald Trump said, wow, I didn't know so many people were uninsured. Anyway, he's even said, well, maybe I'll support Medicare for all. Now, Donald Trump is going to move, reading the contemporary conditions, but Biden is going to hold to his stupid Democrat centrist position, no matter that the house is on fire. He wants to use the centrist hose that has no water in it, but just keep holding it and saying, we're going to put out the fire. We're centrist. We don't want to offend the whites. We don't want to offend people. So we're just going to, and meanwhile, Bernie got a hose with water that could put the whole fire out. And all Biden had to do is say, thank you, Bernie. I'll take the hose from here since they don't want you carrying it. I'll hold it and I'll put the fire out. FDR was not naturally liberal. FDR moved because the environment and the conditions and the market failure of 1929 forced him to a liberal policy position. LBJ was a Southern segregationist, a Texan. And LBJ becomes the most liberal president in American history because contingency and exigency requires the president to be flexible and to adapt to whatever history puts on his lap. And Biden is being given the great opportunity to become an FDR. Instead, he wants to be a goddamn Ronald Reagan. Excuse me. And this is not the time for Ronald Reagan. This is not the time for conservatism or conservative arguments. This is the time for liberals and progressives to say, this system is broke, and Corona has exposed its brokenness on so many levels that we can never go back to the old ways. And instead, Biden is saying, let's just stick to what has failed in the past. And this goes back to uninspiring politics, uninspiring campaigns, uninspiring the young, uninspiring Black people, uninspiring women people, uninspiring poor people, because the Democrats, to me, in the political science scholarship, if I was to pull one of these books here that is an introduction to the government book, the chapter on political parties will inevitably have a section on it that is called Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Yes, the parties are different and elections have consequences, and yes, they matter. But in terms of the way in which both parties play off each other against the people is what I think Donald is what is going to benefiting Joe Biden right now, because Biden is not moving when the conditions require him to move, particularly if he wants to draw on the Bernie impetus or the Bernie movement. Biden has to try to attract those people by making appeals to them around policy. They don't want to vote for Trump. But Biden is saying, I'm not going to move on healthcare in spite of the crisis. And it's like part of why Bernie failed is because he acted old and didn't change with the campaign's requirements and exigencies. And we see Biden, at least in this particular area, doing the same thing around healthcare as Corona is exposing it. He's not showing adaptability. And that, to me, is off-putting for voters who are looking for a reason to vote for him, even though they don't want to support him. And if he made this appeal and basically started sounding more like FDR and less like Ronald Reagan, Joe Biden really is, I think, fumbling on a great opportunity that is before him, that Corona, unfortunately, as a thing, has provided for him. And every president has to adapt to the realities that they inherit. And Biden has realities, but he wants to put old wine in these new wineskins.